Like save your money with the idea that the world's really fragile and you might lose your job next week. You might get divorced next year. You might get cancer. We might have a recession. And by the way, in due course, one of those will happen to you, to everybody. Everybody is going to experience some version of something like that.
At some point.
At some point. And you have no idea when it's going to occur. You need to prepare for it to occur at any moment. But the most important but is if you can endure that and survive those things, the rewards for those who stick around can be incredible.
Yes.
And so like I've been an investor for 20 years. I made my first investment in 2003. During that period, there has never been a single day in which you could not have pointed to 100 things going wrong in the world. And wrong in the stock market. Stocks are overvalued. The Fed is screwing up. Congress is a mess. Companies are going out of business. Every day you said that. And during that period, the stock market's up fourfold.
Right.
And I think that applies to a lot of it. It applies to your personal life, where in any given day, you and I were talking right before we recorded about some stresses I'm having in business, some stresses you're having in business. Every day is like that. But then you look at 10 years or 20 years, and for a lot of people, it's like, wow, the progress over that period is actually pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I don't know if this is accurate to even say, but my partner, we were driving in, it's either yesterday or this morning, I can't remember, but we were driving in this office building where we shoot this podcast. And the parking is so expensive here in Century City. It's Los Angeles, but the parking monthly is the same amount as my rent was in Columbus, Ohio in 2008. Like the parking to be in this building is the same as my monthly rent apartment back then. And
I'm surprised it's not more.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And he was like, man, look how far, like over, 16 years, look where, or I guess 15 years ago, look where you're at now, 2008, 2009, and see how far it's come. And sometimes we don't know how much progress we've actually made unless we really look back a decade and say, okay, where was I a decade ago? And where am I now?
Yeah.
Especially financially, I guess, right?
Totally. One of the points from Same as Ever is the idea that bad news tends to happen very quickly, but good news is a slow compounding over time. So bad news can be 9/11, COVID. It literally happens in one day. You wake up and you say, oh, like what? How did this happen? Almost all good news, though, is a 5 to 10% improvement per year. Now, if you do that for 20 years, you look back and you're like, wow, we've come a long way.
Yes.
But what you're actually paying attention to, because it's in your face, is the bad news that happens very quickly. So that's where your attention goes to, even if in the background, there's this incredible slow build of progress.
What's the biggest thing you realized in the research of Same as Ever about the future, taking risks, and where we should be putting our attention?
One of the first chapters, the first chapter in the book is a focus on how fragile the world can be and how the world can hang by a thread in your personal life and throughout history. How we look back, and when you try to connect the dots in hindsight of how we got here, it will give you so much humility on the idea that we know where we're going next. Like there's a saying, like if you know where, like to know where we're going, you have to know where we've been. But the truth is, if you know where we've been, you realize we have no clue where we're going next. One of the stories that I use in here that's always just utterly blown my mind is that back in the Revolutionary War in the 1700s, there was a period, the Battle of Long Island, when George Washington and his troops were cornered by the British. And the British were just about to wipe them out. The war would have been over. All they had to do was sail up the East River in New York. They would have cornered George Washington, and it's all over. It didn't happen because the wind was blowing in the wrong direction that night. So they could not sail up the East River. George Washington got away, and the rest was history.
Wow.
David McCullough, this great renowned historian, was asked, he said, if the winds were blowing south instead of north that night, would there be a United States of America? Without hesitation, no. So how do you, when you say there's a million of those kind of stories in your own life and through history, but when you accept that, how do you look at the next 50 years and think you know where it's going to go? When literally the entire existence of the United States relied on the winds blowing in New York on some night in 17, whatever it was.
So if the world is so unpredictable in the future, where should we be putting our time, attention? How should we be setting goals? Should we be visioning goals we even want, or does none of that matter?
I think so. I've always been a financial writer. And what bothered me for a long time, still does, is how bad we are at predicting what's going to happen next.
Right. And there's always analysts.
When's the next recession? When's the stock market going to fall? Nobody has a clue. We will keep doing it as we always have, but no one has any ability to do it consistently. So there's two things you can do with that. One is just become a fatalist and say, no one knows what the hell's going to happen. Nobody knows anything. The other is, let's focus our attention on the behaviors that never change. What were people doing 100 years ago, 500 years ago? Okay, let's focus on those things because we know they're going to be doing them in our future.
What are those main behaviors that never change?
A lot, like how people respond to greed and fear and risk, how people are so attracted to stories and narratives, people's tribal affiliations. Like those have never changed. And if you're a student of history, you can read about what was going on 500 years ago. And what will shock you is how many of those things you're like, oh, we still do that today.
Wow.
So when you find that, you're like, okay, well, that's what we need to focus on for the future. And I think it's true in your individual life as well. I read this shocking thing just this morning, and this is going to go in a direction that nobody probably saw this coming. The single best metric for whether you are going to cheat on your spouse is how many people you slept with before you got married.
Oh, man.
Those behaviors don't change.
Wow.
If you were constantly sleeping with somebody else every week before you got married, really good chance you're not going to be able to shed that behavior in the future after you get married, and vice versa. And I think that is applicable, that idea is applicable to so many things in life.
Interesting.
So when you're looking at your own behavior, who have you always been? What have you always done?
Yes.
Good chance you're not going to get rid of that kind of behavior.
What should we be worried about within ourselves or the people around us when it comes to money and opportunities? Should we be worried more about people's desire for power and greed, or people's envy, or what are the things that we should be concerned about, the emotions from the past that keep coming up today?
I think the most dangerous trait in money, whether it's saving or investing, is FOMO, fear of missing out. It's if you are susceptible to watching your neighbors or your friends or your coworkers get rich, and that just makes you boil with envy. And even if it doesn't feel like envy, you see it, you say, I need that as well. That is so dangerous for two reasons. One, if you watch someone getting rich fast, there's a very good chance that it's not sustainable, that there's going to be a reversion to the mean, and your friend who made 10,000% in Bitcoin, you're not going to be able to repeat that. Right. So if you chase that after the fact, like you're in trouble.
You're going to lose it.
The second thing is how fake is probably the wrong word, because I think it's innocent, but people put their best foot forward. So what they are showing you is usually not indicative of what it is.